standard Merlin engine in the Mark 9 was a Merlin 64 or 264. They came up with a 66 engine or a 266. The 2 indicated it was made by Packard, and the other number was the standard Rolls-Royce number. And the differences were that the standard engine, the 64, was designed to give its maximum power at about 17,000 feet. The 66 was designed to give its maximum power below 5,000 feet, 4.8 or some number like that. And the differences were the gearing, the speed, the diameter, etc. of the superchargers. And the supercharger was geared such that with the density of air coming in, that's what it was going to do. They also incidentally came out with another model, the Model 70, which was designed for high level, and it gave maximum power at something like 27,000 feet, somewhere up there. And those aircraft, for using that, also had long wings. You might have seen photographs of the Spitfires with very long wings, not very elegant, but they were designed for fly well at high level. And so, reading about it, anything below about 15,000 feet, the truncated wings were significantly better. It cut the turning circle, or it increased the size of the turning circle, but that didn't matter a lot because the Spitfire was could outturn anything in Europe anyway. And so whether you outturned it by a factor or a factor that's 10% less, didn't matter a hell of a lot. You were outturning it dramatically. The bad thing was it landed a little bit faster. The good thing was it had a hell of a lot better roll rate. And one of the things I noticed about the Spitfire is that the roll isn't really great. Airshow flying with warbirds is not easy to make a really good display. They're okay when they're in formation and you can see things happening and there's items of interest, but the problem with a single aircraft is it was designed for 20,000 feet. And when you're at an air show, you've got to remember the audience are humans, and a human has got a short-term memory ability of about 7 seconds. And you'll all experience that. You'll be talking to someone and the phone will go and you put it down and say, now what was I saying? And you'll all experience that sort of thing. You've got a 7, your wife says to you, you say, I'm going to the shop. She said, oh, will you give me some butter? And you say, said I was going to get my wife something. What was it? And you actually have to do something to shift from your short-term memory to your longer-term memory. And if you say, I've got this warbird that's really good, it goes at 350 knots, and you go 350 knots, it's 30 seconds before the thing appears back here, and by this time the crowd says, oh, what was that? The best displays that I've seen for a single warbird are done by Keith Skilling at the Corsair. The Corsair is a very nice aeroplane to display, and Keith's right there. There right in front of you. And so that's what I try to do with the Spitfire. I come in at something over 300 knots, do a tight turn, quite low down. And if you want a bit of a buzz flying a Spitfire, that's what you do. A tight turn at low levels, a bit of a buzz. And I try to keep it all close in. I try to show the wooden form by doing a lot of rolling back like this. Tight close in, and I try to show the turning circle because the Spitfire was a great dogfighting aircraft, and nothing outturned the Spitfire except a 0 at low speed. And I think there's a couple of other Japanese aircraft they were defeated at low speed. The message was, don't tangle with those things at low speed. Use your power to climb and get away. But with a message that they were turning inside a message that every day of the week. I've painted the colours of the New Zealand pilot Colin Gray, New Zealand's most successful pilot in terms of kills. In the book he talks about some message from the pilot turned into a fight. He said that was a very silly thing to do. He said no message could ever outturn a Spitfire. And he said it took 2 turns behind him. But so that's what I try to do in my display. Again, warbird displays are not easy to show something that's going to keep the crowd interested. My aircraft, if you'll be aware, is a two-seat Spitfire. During the war, there were no British-made two-seat Spitfires. Russians, I understand, converted some, but they didn't have a lot, so they couldn't afford to lose them. The British had none. That's possibly a cause for a lot of the number of accidents they had. But after the war, there was demand for them. Supermarine converted a Mark 8 as a prototype, and that Mark 8 used to live in America. In fact, it was on at Oshkosh. It's been at Oshkosh for a number of years. I understand it's just recently been sold back to Britain, and it will undoubtedly be flying. But at that point, the Supermarine bought back 29 airplanes from the RAF. And they converted those aircraft to two-seaters, and they were sold to the Irish, Dutch, Indian, South African, and one or two other places, and a number of them were resold later. But most of the two-seaters that we're just seeing around today, there's only 5 of them, were ex-the Irish Air Force. One of those aircraft was ML417. Spitfires, incidentally, are noted by the, I guess all British aircraft are noted by a number, which is in fact the RAF contract number. I see this there as RH368. My aircraft is MH367. ML417 was an aircraft out of the Irish Air Force. It was bought by an American. This guy got it to America and he converted it back to a single-seater. So all the two-seat componentry, standard two-seat componentry from Supermarine was available. At that stage there was a guy who was a POM who lived in Florida, and his father had been a Spitfire pilot in Malta, and he wanted to take his father for a fly before he died, and so he set about a project and bought the remnants of MH367 and got the two-seat parts from ML417 and he put those together. In fact, like a lot of Spitfires, a bit of a mixer. The wings came from a different one, BR601, and built up that way. But on a Spitfire, there's only one bit of solid structural item in the whole thing. And that's the main frame number 5, and that designates the Spitfires, whereas serial numbers and everything come from as frame number 5 that exists. And it's frame number 5. The engine mounts are attached to frame number 5, which is a big solid piece of gear. The wings are attached to frame number 5. The tank is attached to frame number 5. And all the longerons and the structure that supports the pilot and the fuselage and the tail and everything are all on frame number 5. And so that designates it. And frame number 5 is, on my aircraft, is from MH367. I have here a couple of the original nameplates off that. You might to see it's a bit of rusty old metal, but if you're interested, I'll leave those there for you to look at later. But they also contain another number which you'll see, CBAF, which stands for Castle Bromwich Aircraft Factory, and that's their number 5487. But that's those things as they were. A little bit of trivia about Spitfires. The Spitfire is the only Allied fighter that was made right throughout the war. In fact, it was continued being made and later upgraded things until about 1946. During the war, the maximum weight of these things doubled. It went from 6,000 pound, just a skerrick under 6,000 pound, to something over 12,000 pound. That just sounds like 6,000 pound, but in airline terms, 6,000 pound There's 30 passengers and all their baggage. So that's the sort of passenger load that we put in a DC-3. The weight of a maximum all-up weight of a Spitfire went from at the start of the war they all used to land on grass strips. As the war went on, that became more and more impossible. The day that most Spitfires were lost was on the 16th of August 1942, which was the day of the Dieppe parade. That day, 59 Spitfires were lost. That was well into 1942. And in 1942, the Germans had an abundance of Focke-Wulf 3 190s that were far better than the Mark 5 Spitfires. The Mark 9 Spitfires that were just coming on stream. I think there were about 6 or 7 of them took part in that battle. But the rest of the Mark 5 Spitfires, 59 of them were beaten. The RAF had lost 97 aircraft in total that day, which is the big difference between the early Spitfires and the late Spitfires was the engine. The wing was essentially the same, the fuselage the same. As more power was put into it, the tail things were increased in size, but it was the engine that was the difference, the Merlin engine. And the Merlin, Rolls-Royce with the Merlin did an absolutely marvellous job. They did two things. One is they kept running them until on the dyno until they broke, and then fixed the broke bit, and then they run the next one. And they started off trying to get them to do 100 hours at maximum power setting. When they first put one on, it was a Model 66. They put it on the dyno to do 100 hours, and at 23 hours or something it failed. So they put another one on, and at 23 hours it failed. So they fixed that bit, and then they kept upgrading it as it went. By the time they had finished, they could run one for take a engine off the assembly line, put it on the dyno, run it for 100 hours at maximum power. They'd give it a grease and an oil change sort of thing, and put it on and run for another 100 hours. So the reliability improved dramatically, but the main thing was the supercharger. The whole game of getting power out of things was improvements in the supercharger. The man who did all that was a fellow named Stanley Hooker. He was a mathematician. It's an interesting book. When he first started working for Rolls-Royce, Sir Henry Rolls, or whoever it was, said he doesn't look to be much of an engineer. But he did the mathematics, which is quite extreme, involved with compressing air and all that sort of stuff. And he designed the superchargers that were so superb in that aircraft, in the Griffin aircraft. Prior to the war, at the end of the war, he left and joined a company that was making gas turbines, and they started jet engines. He, after the war, left that and came back to the Supermarine, senior manager, became a director of Rolls-Royce. The last two engines he designed turbine engines were the Pegasus, which was the turbine that drives the Harrier, and the Olympus, which was the turbine that drives the Concorde. So the man had a spectacular career, and the success of the Spitfire is largely a success. I've probably overshot my time. I'm just going to talk a little bit about air show flying, if you wanted to discuss that, or if you have any questions you have, I'd be happy to try to answer them or comment or whatever. So,
one was delivered from the factory to a squadron. It was refueled, rearmed. It took off and was shot down 20 minutes later, completely destroyed. That's the shortest record of the life of any Spitfire that was built.
I've got a book that talks about the most successful Spitfire, and it was a Mark 9 that either went to Sailor Milan or Johnny Johnson or somebody, Johnson, when he was the squadron leader, and that aircraft shot down to some number like 10 or 12 before he went on and whatever happened after that, I'm not sure. But the numbers of the aircraft didn't last long. The numbers that they were getting shooting down weren't that great. But yeah, that's the way it was.
What was the training like to get into your Spitfire for you personally? What were the steps you took?
Well, I sat in the back with Keith Skilling a few times and just got used to handling it. And then we went over to Thames and did circuits. We did a few circuits at Thames, and he said, okay, let's go back to Ardmore. So I came back to Ardmore, and he said, well, that's good enough, I'll sign my book, and he said, take it away, which was a bit nervy. In fact, there were a lot of teething problems with it. The company in America, they'd done 14 hours. The company in America that had refurbed it did a pretty cursory sort of job. Nowhere near the quality that Aspen's would do. Things like, I was with Frank Parker quite early on. Hadn't done very much by myself, so I was sort of a nervy kid in it. And we come into land, and we don't get 2 green lights. And when you don't get 2 green lights, it sort of fills you with a lot of doubt. And we flew past the tower, and how did the undercarriage look? Oh, I think it's okay. that really fills you with a good feeling. But it was done by some really bad wiring. There's about 3 little micro switches that are in each undercarriage lead that would have to be connected in a certain way. And they were obviously a bit short of wire because they sort of stretched the wire a bit and only had it was just a standard bit flex wire, plastic covering, and the ends were only sort of had about 2 strands of copper, and in the movement and this thing was broken. But there were a number of incidences like that where the work done, like on the cowlings, they had the cowlings were aluminium, and they'd put on brass reinforcement where the screws went through. But the brass reinforcement was just riveted straight onto the aluminium with no painting or anything between them. And so that creates a little electronic circuit there, an electric circuit which causes corrosion, so they all had to be fixed. The exhausts all failed, they didn't spend 20 grand on the exhausts. It was not a good job that they had done.
So, are you about okay with it now? Is it okay? Is it done?
Well, there's always things that go wrong, and the problem with an aircraft like that is you can't just go down to the Cessna agent and buy a part. At the moment, we've got an air pressure problem that there's a lot of stuff that's pneumatic in it, and unless you turn the air off at the tank when you land, after about 24 hours or so, the pressure's dropped down. Little things like that. But don't little. But a radiator leaks. The whole thing's built. I think the radiators must be the first thing they got put onto the assembly line and build the aeroplane around it. Because the radiator leaks, so you've got to take the radiator out, which is about 4 or 5 or 6 hours. They take the radiator out, test it, and do something there, it's all put it back in. Oh, it's leaking still. Out it comes.